American Express is set to refresh a bunch of their cards. Today, we'll talk about the likely candidates, the one that I want but is probably wishful thinking, and also how these changes over the years have impacted their stock price relative to the stock market. The answer might surprise you. Before we dive into everything, big favors to give us a thumbs up to help with the algorithm. If you know someone that might benefit, then share this with them. Okay, starting off, the reason we're talking about this is because during one of their earnings call, they mentioned that they were refreshing 35 to 50 products a year, and they're going to try to maintain this pace for 2025. Also note that the 35 to 50 number is not just US, it's going to be all their cards across all countries. So for example, if they update the Platinum card in Japan and also the Platinum card in Hong Kong, then that's not one product, it's going to be two products. For the US, I'm guessing 5 cards, and I'd probably bet the under. A big reason for this is because there's not that many options that would make sense. For example, if we look at the core cards, the gold was just updated in 2024, so that's probably not going to get touched. The platinum was updated in 2021, but I feel like they would probably wait until 2026 for the 5-year mark. Instead, I think the most likely target is going to be the green card, which was last updated in 2019. Also, the fact that they probably don't want to update the green card and the platinum card in the same year, they'd rather have 2 different product releases and pushes. The green also kind of makes sense because its credits have pretty much evaporated. One of the big draws was Lounge Buddy, and that doesn't really exist anymore. With that, I think we will see new credits, and I'm kind of curious what you think, but I have a few predictions. So first off, I think we're going to a $195 annual fee because that just kind of makes sense. It's $150 right now. If they want to increase it, $195 kind of works. They'd probably want to stay under $200 though, because there is that barrier and mentally it just feels like a lot more money. In terms of credits, I think they will keep the up to $199 for Clear Plus. If I had to guess, that doesn't cost as much as we might think. In addition, I think they will add some everyday benefits, such as Uber or Resi. So let's say up to $10 for Uber per month and up to $10 for Resi. The big benefit is that it also helps with marketing. So it's a $195 annual fee, but you have up to $240 in credits, and you also get Clear on top. This kind of keeps it in line with the other cards and the ones that have done really well, where you either break even or you get value on top if you spend at certain places. It is targeted towards people that live in cities that do certain activities, but that's fine, and we'll get into that. In terms of multipliers, I think they're mostly fine, but I will be curious if they get rid of one of them and maybe swap something else in. 3x on travel makes sense given how broad it is for airfare, hotels, tours, campgrounds, and everything else that would count for that. 3x on transit makes sense given that it is more of a city card targeted towards people that are commuting. In the same vein, 3x on dining makes a ton of sense for that demo, but it also does kind of compete with the gold. So I guess the question for them is whether they want people to have the green or the gold, or maybe green and the gold. Right now, it's in a pretty weird spot where for some people, if the maths, then you can get both, but oftentimes people are choosing one or the other. For a lot of people getting the gold, they might be covering travel with a competitor. So ironically, there might be a world where it might make more sense to actually get rid of the 3x for dining for restaurants and swap in 3x for entertainment. This is a category that Capital One has pretty much had a monopoly over, so this kind of disrupts them, and it also changes the landscape. It kind of feels like you're getting rewarded rather than punished by having both cards. Also, I feel like entertainment as a category makes a ton of sense, given the people that are interested in the green card. If you look at Google Trends, it's pretty much what you'd expect. So pretty much the East and West Coast, you have DC, New York, Washington State, Hawaii, and Jersey rounding off the top 5. For 6 to 10, you have Mass, California, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Virginia. If American Express wanted to break the matrix, then they could add 2x on everything on the green card, and that would disrupt the whole system. I don't think that's going to happen for a ton of reasons, and even if it did, they probably would have a cap, but it'd be super cool. Okay, so outside of these flagship cards, what about other core cards? My first thoughts were the Blue Cash Everyday and Blue Cash Preferred, but they were last updated in 2022, and I'm not really sure if they would change much. So for example, for the Blue Cash Everyday, it's a no annual fee card, and it has a credit, so it's kind of a keeper card by virtue of the credit, and it makes sense. I know some people hate this phrasing, but it's a no annual fee card, you're getting a credit, you're getting value by keeping the card. I guess if you don't care about Disney Plus, then there's no value, but for a lot of people, it still makes sense. One logical change that I think makes a ton of sense, but doesn't really move the needle too much, is going to be increasing the cap. So the cap for the multipliers for grocery stores have been pretty consistent for the whole time I've been on YouTube, and even before that. So it just doesn't really make sense because with inflation, the cost of everything has gone up. $6,000 5 years ago, 10 years ago, isn't $6,000 now. If anything, I'd probably bump that up to 12,500 or the 25,000 number to match the gold. This one I don't really see cannibalizing competing because the gold is points and this is cash back. So even though it feels similar, it's a very different audience, and I find that people focused on cash back generally don't care about the upside of points. Two that I think would be super interesting, but I'm kind of questioning, are going to be the everyday and the everyday preferred. Funny enough, the everyday was my first Amex card, which ended up being a mistake given the meta at that stage, but it was fine. I liked it and it got my foot in the door, but it wasn't the most competitive. Especially if you look at the landscape nowadays, the cards look relatively weak. Like, it's kind of crazy that we were impressed with these multipliers. Also, as a filming, you cannot apply for the cards, but maybe that changes in the future. So technically they could update it and revamp it and make it competitive again, but again, it's the cannibalization issue and whether it makes sense to even have these cards. But yeah, in a lot of ways, it feels like these cards are a bit deprecated compared to the green and the gold of right now. It kind of feels like the gold card took the job of the everyday and the everyday preferred because the gold before was very different. For co-branded cards, I don't think we're going to see much because Delta got updated and same thing with Hilton. I'm going to make a prediction and it's probably going to be way off, but I do want it to happen, and it's an update to the Bonvoy Brilliant. So last update was 2022, which isn't too long and arguably not long enough for them to update it yet. Main reason why it might be updated and why I think it needs to be updated is the change to their top hotels. Recently, they've been increasing prices pretty significantly on some of their best hotels. So for example, St. Regis or Ritz-Carlton Maldives, and pretty much all the ski hotels and expensive areas that people like to go to summer or winter. It's not all of them, but definitely a lot of the flagships, which is kind of a shame. Before, the ceiling for this was about 100k points. Sometimes you'd have it a little higher, so 103k, but you'd know that it'd be around that range. So even when they did remove the cap, it was still floating around the same range, so it was still useful. But now, that's not really the case. For example, the St. Regis Maldives is a hotel that we've been to that we really liked, and when we booked it, it was 85k points per night. The cost now has ballooned pretty aggressively, and the low, cheap nights are 150k per night. On the top end, 172k, so pretty aggressive. I feel like low should be 90k or something, not 150k. The crazy thing is that the value is still technically there because you're getting more than 1 cent per point based off the retail price and what most people are paying. So technically good value and makes sense, but also doesn't really make sense. So intro bonuses obviously change, and I don't really want to get too much into that side. But right now, if you look at the offer, and most times for the standard offer, it's not enough to even cover one night here. You could transfer points from bank programs over to cover it, but it's not really worth it. Would I rather spend 150k Marriott points or maybe 30k or 40k Hyatt points? And if I'm transferring them, it's still going to be the same rate. So I'm effectively sacrificing 2 or 3 nights for one night. You could argue that the St. Regis and Ritz-Carlton is a nicer property and it's a step up, but still, that's a lot. And also for some of these places, the rack rates end up being about the same anyways. Even if we're willing to get a lot of Marriott cards, it's pretty tough given the family rules they have, meaning that it's hard to get enough points. In the past, the secret weapon for this has been free night awards, so that 85k free night award from the Marriott Bonvoy Brilliant. The problem though is that it's only 85k in value, that's kind of the maximum. You can top off, but not enough. As of filming, the maximum top off rate is 15k points, meaning that you could use 15k additional to cover a night that's up to 100k. Before, it was pretty usable because you'd have a lot in the 100k range or 90k range, and then afterwards, some floated towards 103, which was annoying, but you'd still find nights for maybe 98k. But now, it pretty much gets neutered and you can't use it. You can still use it, but not at the top hotels, which kind of defeats the purpose. If I had to guess, the Bonvoy Brilliant is going to get a small update to a $695 annual fee to account for these changes, and also so they can make more money. I would think that they upgrade the 85k free night certificate to an anywhere one. So pretty much exactly the same as Hilton, and ideally working in the same way where if there's standard availability, then you're good to go. Which I think is pretty fair. Like, it shouldn't be all nights every night, but if there's availability, maybe 10 or 20% of the rooms, then that seems fine. I think they would keep the up to $25 per month for dining, and if anything, maybe add a new one, let's say up to $10 a month for Resi. Resi credit is mostly there to make it easier for marketing and for people that just don't like annual fee increases without getting more credits. So it's a $45 increase, but you're getting up to $120 in Resi and a better free night award. Speaking frankly, even if they didn't give any additional credits and they just raised the annual fee, I think I'd be happy with that if it was an Anywhere Free Night award. Paying $50 additional for a more useful certificate is more than worth it to me. I probably shouldn't say this because they might actually do it, but even if they bumped it up to 800 and kept all the credits the same, platinum status, and just increased that certificate, I'd be more than willing to take it. Marriott has some pretty nice hotels within Luxury Collection and St. Regis and Ritz-Carlton, so it's just kind of a shame that you can't access them without having to pay out of pocket. I'm more than happy to pay 800 or probably a lower net cost after credits and stuff for something that would otherwise cost 2,500 or 3,000 a night. One of the reasons we stack Hilton cards and we really like them is the fact that you can actually get these certificates pretty easily, either by holding the Spires or by spending on surpasses. For example, we just stayed at Hyundai Hills in Niseko Village, which is part of SLH, Small Luxury Hotels, which is under Hilton. If you're someone that likes points, but you don't like the big chain hotel stays, and you want something a bit more personal and more boutique, then that's perfect. The net cost that we paid for that certificate is about $250, given that we're using taxes to pay it and there's fees for paying with taxes with credit cards. But yeah, more than happy to pay $250 for a night here, given the retail price and also the fact that we like skiing and going to Niseko. The market price, and I think it's a pretty fair one, is about $1,000 to $1,100 after taxes and fees. Even the Hilton Niseko, which is kind of a factory of sorts because there's so many people and smaller rooms, is still about $500 to $800 per night. But yeah, if you like premium travel, then these certificates are amazing and open a ton of doors. On a side note, if you want to learn about American Express cards or pretty much cards from any other issuer, we do have links on the website, asksabi.com, and also down below in the description box. Make sure the links are competitive, but otherwise, it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you in advance. As much as some people hate that Amex is adding credits and increasing fees, it seems to be doing fine for them. It's almost a win-win because they're getting more cardholders, people seem happier with the cards, but they're also making more money. I think there is a large audience that doesn't like the change, but even if they're mass canceling, it doesn't seem to be affecting their financials. I think that it might be a loud minority. In the past few years, Amex has been doing really well and growing a ton, especially among millennials and Gen Z. My theory and why I think it's worked so well is that the cards are net cheaper, given that a lot of these people live in cities and actually spend at these places and have the lifestyle that Amex has built the cards for. So I think the reason why the cards have worked is not because people are willing to get cards and lose money and forcing themselves to do behavior that they don't want to do. It's more that they already do those things. So for example, I'm not a fan of the Dunkin' credit because I'm on the West Coast and I can't really use it. But when we lived in Boston, we would go buy Dunkin's every day and there's always a line. So even though you might not like Dunkin', there's a lot of other people that do and have it as part of their everyday life. Another one would be Uber. So for example, my parents don't really use it. They kind of hate the credit and the idea of the credit because they only really take Ubers when they're going on cruises. Let's say they land in Florida and they're getting an Uber to the cruise station. At the same time, I know people in San Francisco that take 5 to 10 Ubers every week. Resi is a bit of a weird one, but if you eat out, let's say 3 to 5 times a week, then you can probably find a place to use it. If you don't, then that's fine. The idea is you want to find cards that work for you and your circumstances and value credits the way you actually would use them. I think one thing I really harp on this channel and through all my videos and stuff is that your mileage may vary and you need to do what makes sense for you. That's why way back in the day, I used to make spreadsheets and other calculators. That way people could calculate their value. After I realized that there's a lot of people that don't know how to make a copy of and also edit spreadsheets without changing all the formulas, I realized that it was easier just making a calculator page. I think you'd be surprised how many people kept requesting access and they were trying to change the whole page that would affect the page for everyone rather than making a copy and changing their own version. But yeah, for example, for the gold card, you can run the numbers for yourself and your situation. So if you hate Dunkin's, you don't use it, perfect, mark it down to 0. Same thing for Uber. If you don't really use it, then it's 0. The funny thing though is that even if you don't really use the credits and you mark them down pretty aggressively, you might still get value from the card due to the spend. If you spend enough money, then the credits don't really matter. It's nice to have, but the key point is the multipliers. If you're a guy in San Francisco and going out on a lot of dates, then it can get pretty expensive. So for example, I have a friend who's trying to settle down and they're probably spending $750 to $1,000 a week eating out because a lot of the times dates are expensive. That's 3 to 4K eating out, which might not make sense, but it works for him. I think he only ends up using the Uber credit because he uses Uber anyways, and the other credits he doesn't care about. The reason they have caps in some of these categories is because there are people that are pushing up against it, or way past it. American Express is taking the Apple playbook, which I'd argue is the original Amex playbook. Build a strong brand, have customers that like you, and have valuable customers. So, for example, you're definitely going to get people that like PCs and Androids that will hate MacBooks and also iPhones. But the thing is, Apple doesn't need to convert those people because they don't need them. You'd rather have 50 people like you and 50 people hate you rather than 100 who don't really care. Also, side tangent, I pretty much have flip-flopped ecosystems my entire life. So started on an iPhone, went to the Samsung S2 when I was working in Hong Kong, and then kind of flip-flopped between Samsung and Apple, and then threw in some Pixels and OnePluses in the middle. I also have a MacBook when I travel, but a PC at home. Also, I used to use Canon before, and now I shoot with Sony. End of the day, like camera lenses, computers, laptops, and arguably phones, credit cards are tools, and you need to find ones that work for you. Amex has found its audience, and they're happy to spend. So much so that they announced record revenue. Looking at their 1 year for their stock price, it's been doing pretty well. Even if you compare it to the general market, so let's say VU, VTI, and SPY, market is up about 23%, and Amex is almost at 60%. Even if the 5-year, it's beating the market. Market's at 87%, and Amex is at 144. It should get pretty interesting as Amex becomes a de facto pickup among certain demos within millennials and Gen Z. For example, the 250,000 people that are happy to spend $3K to $10K going to Coachella every year. And oftentimes, that's not just one thing, that's one of maybe 4 festivals. Also, what do you know it, but Amex is the official partner for Coachella. The best part about credit cards and why I really like them is that you're incentivized to try them in year 1. With that said, if you want to try something else out and get rewarded for it, then consider Moomoo. They're currently offering 8.1% APY on uninvested cash and up to 15 free stocks. You get 5 free stocks for depositing $100 and 10 extra stocks for depositing $1,000. Current offer ends March 31st, 2025. They also do have a lot of advanced features for traders and short-term investors. Reminder, Moomoo is a registered brokerage regulated by FINRA. They're also a direct member in good standing of SIPC. Worst case, you get rewarded for trying something. Best case, you like it. For the promotion, you need to keep assets in an account for 60 days. But yeah, tons of time to give it a test drive. If you're interested, check out asksabi.com/moomoo or use the link down below. Again, if you want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, asksabi.com, and also down below in the description box. If you made it to this point, leave a package emoji in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. I'm kind of curious what's in the card package for us, given the updates. 3 questions: what updates would you want for the green card? Do you think the Bonvoy Brilliant thing will happen, or is that a bit too wishful thinking? Probably so. And number 3, what other cards would you want updated? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favorite, thumbs up, share this, subscribe, but otherwise hope you liked it. See you next time.